Knowledge brokers are intermediary actors who connect different knowledge holders and different power holders in society. And they build trust between groups who may traditionally not work together. And in doing so, they drive action. I'm just going to change slide here. So the step change supports for locally led adaptation extends to 27 organizations. And these organizations are active in 19 countries in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. My colleague Georgina will share in the Q&A section the link to a brochure about the initiative if you want to learn more about step change. The brochure is available in English and French. So this webinar is part of a series of webinars where the step change community is reflecting on various aspects of the work they do to support equitable and inclusive locally led adaptation. So we've been covering topics like the role of intermediaries in accelerating locally led adaptation and unlocking adaptation finance for local climate action. So if we look at the numbers for today, so we're at 41 people online who are, from Step Change, from Cognate programs, and from IDRC as well. So now let's get into it. So in Step Change, we are supporting Southern-led projects to contribute to equitable and inclusive local climate action. Many of the Step Change projects have established South-South and South-North partnerships. Partnerships for climate action are complex. They involve different actors and power dynamics. And the conventional partnership models carry their own challenges and generally don't foster genuine collaboration, equity, and inclusion. So there is a need to rethinking these conventional ways of partnering and developing equitable Southern-led partnerships. So this can mean fostering equity in power dynamics, in resources, and in access. Fostering equity in Southern-led partnerships can lead to Southern leadership, new forms of feminist leadership, inclusion, and more desirable and equitable outcomes. However, fostering equity in partnerships bring new challenges while the old challenges remain. So today's webinar will unpack the journey to equitable Southern partnership with some practical experiences highlighting their challenges and lessons. We will reflect and exchange on what it means to lead for climate action. And we will learn about some innovations that can contribute to foster equitable partnerships in practice. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll introduce the speakers now. So, so let's meet our speakers for today's learning session. So we actually have today 3 speakers and 2 discussants. So for now, I'll introduce our 3 speakers, and then I'll introduce our discussants later just before their interventions. So I invite Shanaz, Annette, and Susan, if you can turn on your camera as I introduce you. So we really have a great pleasure of having 3 great speakers today. We have Shanaz Moussa. So Shanaz is the CEO of the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, or CDCAN, at South-South North. Under Step Change, CDCAN accelerates equitable and financed locally led adaptation to climate change and specifically supports the voice and climate leadership of marginalized groups. Welcome, Shanaz. We also have Susan Nandudu. So Susan is the director of the African Center for Trade and Development, or ACTADE. She is the principal investigator on the CRACS project within Step Change. And this project builds community resilience through strengthening agricultural adaptation knowledge systems in Uganda. Welcome, Susan. And lastly, we have Annette Nakieyune. So Annette is a researcher on climate change at the International Institute for Environment and Development, or IIED. And she is the collaborating principal investigator on the CRACS project. And so both Susan and Annette collaborate on the same project, and we'll hear from their perspective today. So welcome, Annette.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll invite now Shanaz to take the floor. I'm just gonna move to the slide here. And
Mary,
yes.
can I just mention that Constance is joining us from the community and she couldn't get her link and is using mine. So that's another Susan Tumin colleague. Sorry. Constance,
Okay,
kindly switch off your camera for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I was quite confused there. Thank you, Marie-Eve. So firstly, thank you for all those who are listening, and also to the Step Change people for inviting me to talk to this. I feel completely privileged to be speaking to something that is so close to my heart. I think at the core of it, that shifting power dynamics within partnerships starts with looking internally at the institutions we are in and being completely, ruthlessly honest with ourselves and recognizing that the role we play in maintaining the status quo. Next slide, Marie-Eve. And I think it's really important to realize that with the status quo, there's this huge power dynamic attached to it. As an organization that I'm part of, South North, the status quo in the past, next slide, Marie-Eve, very much served us in the short term. And it was extremely tempting for us to keep working with the status quo and not challenge the system. But we also realize that by doing this, we're just entrenching the current inequalities, the injustices, and the power imbalance that was there. So we had to realize quickly that by emulating our partnerships in the North look like, and that we were actually part of reinforcing this, that as an organization, we were not truly leading in a Southern leadership way. Next slide, Marie-Eve. And I think it was quite a hard truth for us to realize that by ticking all the boxes and by operating as a little Northern organization based in the global South, that we were shifting nothing. We also used the word Southern leadership really loosely, because what we were doing was still looking very much like Northern leadership. And we had to do quite a bit of introspection and rethinking and realize that actually, next slide, Marie-Eve, that equitable partnerships has at its core, and this was where we started off 11 years ago, very much emulating a Northern organization. Next slide, Marie-Eve. So for us, we realized that equitable partnerships has at its core trust and transparency, and a deep willingness to listen to feedback and to adapt. And you're not driven by, you're driven by values that are not aligned to maximizing profit. So we actually, like I said, had to do quite a bit of introspection and also realize that not all Southern institutions share the same values. So to realize equitable partnerships, it meant that we had to look at how do we come from a space where there's trust and where we're part of building the trust continuously, And recognizing that when organizations don't share the same values, you often default to a sort of partnership that looks like the status quo. It did mean, it was a next slide, Mariev, because there were lots of learnings for South North in this. We had to really transform the way we worked. We had to start looking at, because part of what this power dynamic looked like was that the organization that has the header contract with the donor is the organization sitting with the money, and therefore you're sitting with the power. And it's very easy in that situation to end up being very top down and managing it in that way. It took us lots of time, lots of adaptive management, and working very closely on the one project, CDKN, very closely with IDRC in a partnership way to start learning about how do we as an organization truly partner with our partners on CDKN, and they were FLA and ICLEI. So it was a Latin American organization and a South Asian organization. And slowly things have shifted, and yet we still hit up against many issues, but we're very open to talking about them. We're very open to naming them. And I think we really committed to moving things forward in a way that actually doesn't resemble a northern or a northern partnership, or something with the power dynamic is really skewed. I think that what we need to recognize, and next slide, please, Mariev. Oh, yeah, so this is just talking to the power dynamic. And then the next slide, I think what we have to recognize and realize is that the system change that we're all looking for, it's not going to come from the outside. As a Southern-based organization, we had to fundamentally shift how our organization internally looked, and that actually true equity comes from doing the internal work at your organization first, before we challenging the external norms and that. And so I think CDKN, the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, that's a part of Step Change, is one of a story of where we've walked this, it's quite, I was going to say, it was a treacherous path from where we as an organization took on a very top-down approach to managing and partnership, and where we now what feels like a more equitable partnership. And I'd like to encourage us as we walk this path to look at pockets of the future that are actually showing up in the present. And that's what we need to emulate in terms of true partnerships, and not to be scared or shy away from shining the light and naming what is not working, because that's the only way we can move forward and move towards true equitable partnerships that are based and led in the South. Thank you, Mariev.
Thank you very much, Shanaz. Wow, so many good points there. I really noted equity comes from doing internal work first before challenging external norms. That introspection, very interesting, and yes, being challenging and inspired by other examples. And yours is a great one, definitely. Thank you. Okay, so I'll now move to Susan and Annette, who will jointly present insights from their experience developing a Southern-led equitable partnership under Step Change, looking at both perspectives from the lead Southern partner, ACTADE, and the Northern partner, IIED, in that journey. So go ahead, Susan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mariev, and thanks for the opportunity to share our experiences on this. For those who do not know, our project is joint project that we're implementing with IIED, focusing on community resilience through agriculture adaptation knowledge systems, and it is focused here in Uganda. Next slide, please. So our experience, to build on what Shinaz said, this partnership is the first of its kind under this project, where as a Southern organization, so ACTADE is the African Center for Trade and Development, an NGO, quite small, with staffing of 10 people. We have had numerous partnerships that have been Northern-led, but with this, we are leading the programming. And where did it all start? So IDRC and the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs put a requirement in the call for this project, and it was a closed call that went to IIED, and when they received it, IIED reached out to us at ACTADE to work together on this project. So for starters, there is the fact that we had worked with IIED before and had a relationship already that had demonstrated trust for them to even reach out and say, can we work together on this project? And once we moved from that, we discussed what it meant to lead the project from the South. And having worked with IIED before, we were so familiar with waiting on them, you know, for details such as agreeing on when we are meeting, scheduling those meetings, and setting the agenda. But next slide, please. In this case, we realized that the tables were turning a bit, and we had to rise up to the occasion. And so what it really meant for us was that, A, we have to learn or step up on the communication. And our communication on this project, first of all, having agreed that we are working jointly, what would that entail? It meant that from the beginning, and Annette will expound on that, of the ideation and proposal development, it was co-creation. So communication had to be very regular, and we realized emails were not enough. We picked up on having virtual calls. And so in the implementation, we agreed that every 2 weeks we would meet virtually to catch up on what we've agreed on and set the next agenda, etc. But even that is not enough. Sometimes we need quick decisions, knowing that they are in the north and we are at the implementation level. Sometimes it calls for quick information and decision making. So we even communicate through WhatsApp. But mutual respect, again, to build on Shinaz's point, we had to define it. We had to, because when you start communicating so regularly, you realize that even methods of work are different. So we decided to define boundaries, who does what, and by when, became very, very critical in ensuring that there is a smooth rolling of the the project. But openness is equally important, and Shinaz has talked about it, that we are both open to learn from each other. Now, IIED comes with very wide experience and networks and all that, but they had to step back and also learn from us. As much as environment where we are free to learn from each other is very, very critical, and to speak to the transparency and accountability. We clarified that everything has to be open to all of us. So in addition to the catch-up calls, the joint decision-making, we also submit reports jointly. So we write everything together. Tade will draft, will initiate, we'll have the brainstorming together in the meetings, and then build it up with the co-creation, sometimes with virtual tools, etc. But a very important thing to add is that being able to report jointly to the donor has been an interesting and new experience to us, because with other Northern the partner is sharing with the donor, for example. Next slide, please. And so we have identified, so far we are 1 year, nearly 1 year into the implementation of the project, but about 1.5 years with cracks. There's benefits that are coming to us as a Southern organization, that yes, we have direct access to a donor where we are building relationships. So IDRC, for example, had been a funder that we would have loved to connect with, but previously we could not. And through this relationship, we then get access to a family of the donors that are equally open-minded. We also see that we have a lot of access to technical assistance. There's a very wide variety of experience from IIED that we are leveraging. The researchers, the communications experts, some of things that we have not even been budgeting now, it's becoming visible to us how important they are. And because of that, we are also getting the quality assurance for our documentation. We have access to templates and visibility and so on. But this also comes with challenges. So I'd like to speak to just two and then invite Annette to share from the IIED's perspective. That one, the co-creation, the partnering with a Northern partner in the sense that we are doing it requires a lot of time. There's a lot of time for back and forth in consultations, because we have decided, agreed to the value of transparency. Every document, everything has to be agreed to jointly. So it does take time, and we need to build in that time when preparing projects such as this one. And secondly, it comes with budgetary constraints. In this case, we had a ceiling of a project to work with, and we were very ambitious, potentially very excited to work together on this knowledge brokering project. But at the budgeting, we realize that it constrains the amount or the number of activities that we can have at the community level. As for instance, we have to build in costs of the northern partner that sometimes are higher. They are higher than the costs and rightly so, because they are northern based. I'd like to leave it at that and invite Annette to continue with the next slide, please.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, Marie, keep going until when the infographic shows up. Yeah, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Shinaz. Listening to both of you, I've come to appreciate the fact that equitable partnership is not just a set of abstract principles, but rather how we treat each other as partners and the values that underpin how we work together. So it is real work. It is real work. And part of this, learning from cracks, we have, as IID, we have implemented many projects where we have led the teams. And this one was different. The Southern partner was going to lead the team. Much as we've had great experience working with partners, but it was in a different way. So what this meant was that there had to be adjustments in how we work, and we had to put in work to live those values that we have about partnership. One of the things that I would like to share about today that came out strongly in this process is the co-creation process. This process can be so time-consuming and quite messy. And for Cracks project, we started from the scratch, from a clean slate. I remember the first meeting we had with Aktade, all we were armed with was the call from Step Change, nothing else. No one had scribbled anything in terms of project idea or anything. So I remember that day we used Jamboards and we started constructing the idea, project idea, geographic focus and methodology and all of that. I remember that it took us 3.5 hours. That session took us 3.5 hours to build that up. And then it went on like that. But what the beauty in this was that this process addressed the challenge, the perennial challenge that militate against ensuring equity in partnership, which is always co-opting partners to an already designed project, or actually getting them just to sign that, okay, we are part of it. That practice is very disempowering. That practice mutes the voice of partners, Southern partners. It limits their power, their decision-making power in the project already. That actually brings in the issues of sharing roles. How will you have a platform to negotiate on roles in such kind of an environment? But starting from scratch meant that we built this project together. It was truly joined. And we shared roles. We started understanding each other's strengths, each other's gaps. And we used Google Docs, for example, when we were building concept notes and proposals. We used Google Docs for transparency. So we are working in this one document. And why I call this a messy process, I remember there are days when I opened this Google Doc and I was overwhelmed with how this document looked like. We'll track changes with a whole list of comments and dense list of comments and all that, because we were 3 people in IID and 3 people in ACTADE working on this one document. And so at some point it was overwhelming, but what was gratifying in the end, we got out something that is truly jointly produced. And this also speaks about, for example, intellectual property, which is one of the challenges in these partnerships. But for cracks, no one can claim intellectual property here because it was jointly produced. But what was critical here is the time this process takes. For example, the meetings alone that we had, calls alone, took around 17 hours. That is more than 2 days' work. These are just meetings minus now the real work where we go into the documents and work and edit and read and all that. So it is very time consuming, but that is the only way you can ensure that partners, both global North and global South partners, can be creative, can make decisions together, and can own an agenda, a research agenda. And sharing of roles also happened at this stage, knowing who will do what, and what does Southern leadership mean, and how are we going to ensure that. So these discussions started at this stage. Second slide, please. So the second lesson that I can pick out from cracks is having a supportive funding mechanism, because we all know that in most cases, some of the barriers that militate against equitable partnerships originate from the funding infrastructure that are cascaded down to the Southern partners. So, but for cracks project, Step Change Initiative, there was this kind of difference in the funding infrastructure, how it was designed. Number one, Southern leadership was designed in the core. So the funder was very intentional about Southern leadership. But they did not stop at that, because I've seen calls like those where the funder says it should be Southern led, and they don't put in place supportive mechanism to ensure that this works. Saying that it should be Southern led is not enough. There is more work to be done by the funder, and to pick lessons from Step Change and IDRC. For example, they were flexible in terms of timelines. They gave good proposal lead time. In total, between the concept note and the proposal, we had about 8 weeks. That is quite reasonable to co-create as teams. And this also supported us to increase interaction, having more meetings, co-creating together, sharing decision-making, building relationship, because it was about building relationship and trust as teams. But also what was unique about this funding mechanism was the activation of funding for learning. There is a strong component for learning in MEL, specifically looking at lesson exchange at different levels. But this was significant for us as cracks, because we have emulated that as a project. We have planned a learning session for ourselves where we plan to pause, step back, and reflect on our journey as a project, but also as a partnership. So the funding mechanism has a lot of influence on the quality of partnership. Infusing equity in partnership will take also adjustments at level of funding. The other lesson that I have picked from cracks is capacity strengthening. Traditionally, capacity strengthening has taken forms of these ad hoc training initiatives. But working on this project, I have seen that actually other non-conventional ways of learning and sharing can contribute to strengthening capacity in different ways. This could include things like coaching, things like mentoring, even interaction building each other up, understanding each other's weaknesses or gaps and strength and all that, and supporting each other. And I have seen change of practice, observable changes that have happened between these organizations that can be linked to this kind of capacity strengthening. And I think maybe it's high time we thought about capacity strengthening that we've been talking about and implementing for many years, because we know that international development has been having a big component of capacity strengthening for so many decades, but the challenge remains. So what kind of capacity have we been strengthening, and how have we been doing it? Is it time to change, to think, to rethink how capacity is shared, how we learn from each other, how we can strengthen each other's capacity? Is it time to look at long-term capacity building approaches? Because mentoring, coaching, and all that takes long term. Is it time to reflect on that? So CRACS offers some of those preliminary kind of opportunities to think about capacity strengthening or capacity sharing. The other lesson is about power dynamics. Power dynamics take time to change, and this has necessitated applying patience, applying flexibility, and open communication. Like Susan said, this was their first experience leading a project where they are leading a Northern-based organization. And for us as IID, leadership has been our space. This was familiar space for us, leading. We have most of what it takes to lead a project really successfully. And what did this mean to us as an organization? It meant that we needed to step back, much as we had what it takes to quickly or faster, in a faster manner, deliver this project. We needed to step back and allow ACTADE leadership to flourish as well. And on ACTADE's part, they also had to change that mindset of waiting on IID to say, oh, this is how we do this, or this is what you should use, or this is, no. So also that kind of mindset to change so that ACTADE can effectively step into that space that IID has left, and which space the funder had also cleared for ACTADE. The funder cleared the space, IID left it, and then ACTADE had to effectively occupy it. But of course, I have to tell you that it has not been like straightforward. There's been times where there are lapses, but we've gone back to being flexible, being patient, being open communication, having open communication to ensure that, yeah, we change these, we support Southern leadership. And also the other lesson that I can pick up from this project is that fruitful and enduring partnerships are rooted in relationship building. And this relationship is built on trust, being transparent. Like I showed you our co-creation process, everything was transparently done. Even when we received comments on the concept note, we came back as a team and said, how do we respond to IDRC? Then we said, okay, we assigned roles. You can look at this, you can look at the other. Then we came back as a team and say, okay, I think we are happy with this response. Now send. So that kind of trust, and also knowing that we can openly speak with each other about the project. We have a shared goal, and we are all focused on ensuring that it is achieved. But of course, respecting boundaries, because these are two different institutions. But relationship building also, I need to mention, takes time, because much as Susan says that she, ACTADE and herself, has been working with IID for so long, But for a person like me, this was my first time to meet them as an organization, and as Susan as an individual. My first time to meet Susan in person was this year in February in Uganda, when I went for the Inception workshop. So there was some kind of relationship to be built between me and Aktade and Susan's team. And that takes time, learning each other, giving each other time to understand what the interest is and how you can meet your interest together. Another slide, please. For this, I want to say that equitable partnership cannot be achieved by one element. And I tend to look at project development and delivery as a system with different actors at different stages. And these actors or elements at the different stages have a role to play to ensure that there is equity in partnerships. There is a lot funders can do in terms of changing their funding infrastructure, reducing on the prescriptive and descriptive, prescriptive and restrictive funding requirements that influence a lot of policies in global North organizations, and then cascaded down to global South organizations. There's a lot of transformation or a lot of reforms that can take place at donor level that can help build equitable partnerships between global North and global South partners. And this can be, for example, I talked about how much time it took us to just co-create a proposal. And this was not funded for both Aktade and us and IID. And in the long term, this might not be possible for organizations to take that time that is unfunded to co-create in that kind of manner. They will find ways of cutting, of reducing costs of co-creation. But if funders, for example, can invest money in such processes of collaboration and research, and also learning from IDRC, invest in learning, that would also help. Also invest in long term so that relationships can be built, because relationships normally happen in long term. And from funders, then I can speak about international organizations like IID and others. There is also a role they have to play. Once the donors have cleared the way, then for them, they can also look at areas around intellectual property. They can look at simplifying their contract and agreements. They can look at capacity building and how that is done, capacity strengthening and how that is done. But also the Global South partners have a role to play. Once the funders and international organizations have created space for them, they should be able to have the right structures, the right systems and processes to occupy that space so that there is no leadership vacuum. And this will take building that up and also mindset change. So once all of us have played our roles, the different actors in this project delivery system, then we can achieve equitable partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan and Annette, for this so rich reflection on your experience in this partnership. So many key elements, some obviously resonating as well with Shanaz's presentation earlier. I note elements of collective effort, openness and trust from project partners, but also from donors, to discuss together what equitable partnership means, the importance to also unpack the values that underpin working together, the importance of the co-creation process for the project proposal and throughout the project, and the need to rethink capacity strengthening. So among other things. And being intentional in creating space for Southern leadership to flourish. So thank you so much for this rich presentation. I'll invite all of our participants to put questions in the Q&As. And at the end of the presentations from the discussants, we'll also have participant will have the possibility to raise their hands and voice your questions if you prefer. So I'm gonna stop sharing now. And I'll now invite our first discussant. So Janice Atela, you can turn on your camera, Janice. Hello, thank you. Janice is the Executive Director of the Africa Research and Impact Network, or ARIN. ARIN is actually co-hosting with us this webinar series. Janice is also the Principal Investigator of the project entitled Locally Led Adaptation Metrics for Africa, or LAMA. So you can find more details on that project and the others like CDKN and the CRACS project in the Step Change brochure that is in the Q&A. The link is there. And we've shared in the chat. So Jonas, you have lots of experience working in different kind of partnerships over the years. I'm really interested in your reactions to what we've heard, you've heard, or we've heard today. So yes, I'll turn it to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Eve. Very insightful inputs from colleagues from ACTED, IID, and also Shenas. I think the points raised are really powerful and fundamental, and I don't want really to dilute them with my reflections. But I just want to say, I think, three things which seem to be coming out of this discussion, but also reflecting a bit on some of the experiences we've had as a network that brings together, a range of researchers and institutions across Africa with different values and perspectives. I think the first thing that comes out quite interestingly is the element of shifting the systems to be able to really achieve equitable partnership. And in this, I think Shenas puts it very well with this SSIN experience, that equitable partnership is not just about implementing and doing things together. It's about really interrogating the values, interrogating the modes of working, interrogating the aspirations, so that there is a level of connection, there's a level of alignment between the different partners. And in that interrogation and shifting of the systems, there is quite a lot that needs to be done, especially from the inside or the internal perspectives of the partners involved. So this is very important because many a times, people talk about equitable partnership, and then people say, okay, you need to work together, let's collaborate, you do this, you do that. And then when the project ends, that's the end of the story. Everyone says bye-bye, and everything ends there. But I guess through the perspective around shifting the systems to be able to reflect a bit on the values of working, to be able to really retune our ethics of doing research and engaging in partnership, to be able to be responsive to the values of the other partner. I think these things are really very fundamental in terms of moving the process forward. Unfortunately, in most interventions, in most initiatives, there is really not so much time to do these things. And I want to really congratulate IDRC, because I think through the step change, there is that intentional push to be able to really enable the partners, Southern and Northern, who are implementing the step change project, to be reflective and to think about what are the values that work for the different partners, and how can these values be aligned, how can these values be sort of connected so that there is equity in the process. And again, I want to say, it is fundamental to really push the systems and change the way we do things in order to achieve equitable partner. But it is not very easy, and not so many organizations would be willing to do that. So the question is, how do you achieve that? And especially because of what, again, Shenas has expressed, that different organizations have different values. So really trying to align is an issue. But then the other fundamental point that has come out of the presentation is the aspect of learning between the partners involved, which I think is very important. The case of IID and ACTA is very interesting in the sense that we see a very, very intentional and transparent learning process. And transparency in the sense that, being honest to say, okay, our systems are not, need to improve and we need to learn from the other partner. By not saying our systems are perfect and we cannot really learn anything from, but saying our systems are there, but there is something to learn from the other partner. So there is a very strong element of learning that then connects to capacity building, because these are enablers of equitable partnership. But then the fundamental question around this is that what are the boundaries of learning, and what are the boundaries of really, reflecting or sort of trying to match, what the other partner can do better. And I'm saying that because some of these things are contextual. You cannot learn, perhaps ACDE cannot learn everything that IID is doing, because IID operates in its, own context. At the same time, IID might not learn everything that perhaps ACDE is doing. So how do we define those boundaries and ensure that the learning and the process of, as been said, co-creation and in all, those engagements are actually well defined within the premise of the institutions, without losing the value of the institution, without losing the visions and the sort of the goals of the institution, because that is also where the conflicts will come through. So again, that's very important. While there's a lot of learning, capacity building in the process, defining those boundaries in a co-creation or in a more sort of integrated process is very critical. And finally, Marie-Eve, I just wanted to highlight a very critical point that again has come out, which I would reflect on it a bit in terms of how do you enforce or how do you reinforce equitable partnership? And that ties to some of the points that have been raised around the systems in terms of funding, for instance. Really, how the ways funding systems are set up, what are the opportunities to ensure that these systems are able to support, equitable partnerships, that these systems are able to support co-creation, for instance. There has been an example around, for instance, spending a lot of time to really co-create ideas and to build relations and to build, a shared agenda. But the question is, who pays for that? Because then it takes quite some time to do that. In the funding process, do we have provisions that are able really to reinforce that? Because the fundamental problem, again, with equitable partnership with regards to research funding, and this is critical, is the fact that there are really very excellent frameworks around this. But the enforcement of these frameworks is really, really always a challenge. I've seen this with a number of projects. I must say IDRC has done really very well, because there is very specific focus on ensuring that safeguardings, protocol, JC are all really achieved. But there are also some funds that are put in place to ensure that that happens. Most of the fundings do not have that, or most of the funding agencies do not have that. So in the end, you find a situation whereby equitable partnership is mentioned in paper, it's mentioned in proposals, but then in practice, there is no reinforcement. I've seen projects where, once funding is provided, the project PI really becomes the Bible. And sometimes some of these funds, which basically have to have somebody from the north leading the project, it becomes really very difficult for the southern partners to really be able to engage and be able to inform the equitable partnership. So really intentional support and enforcement of the processes involved in building equitable partnership is really very important. So there, Marie-Eve, I have so much to say there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Janice. Yes, definitely. Yeah, you have also quite some experience, and it resonates very well here. And yeah, I note your points of, again, pushing the system, being intentional and transparent in all that process, but also setting boundaries, in co-creation and the importance of funding systems. Thank you very much. I invite again everyone who's joining us today. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our second and last discussant. So Santiago Albacoral. Santiago is the Vice President for Programs and Partnerships at IDRC. Santiago cares deeply about equitable partnerships for climate action, and this is a major priority for IDRC in general. So Santiago, you've worked on these issues for many years from your perspective, but also based on what you've heard today, what does it take to really create, develop, and nurture equitable partnerships, Southern partnerships that contribute to local climate action? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And it's always difficult to say something new after the step change team working together and bringing all the expertise. And I was listening to Johannes. I was like, I want to say that. I want to say that. I want to say that as well. I think that I want to try to speak a little bit from the donors, from the funder perspective. That is. He said no. Okay, but sorry. And we have heard a lot today how much actually how donors work actually is critical in creating the space and the environment to succeed in Southern-led partnerships. And it's very interesting because that automatically is putting a level of power that actually is unbalanced in the sense that the donor has the resources but I think we are going there. We are getting there, and we have here today time, a lot of times across. So it's really partnerships, relationships, and changing structures require time, and that's going to give us, with time comes patience. Intentionality, and I want to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's critical. Things don't happen because what they say, that's because we just say that they are going to happen in the title of a call for proposal or a new initiatives. Things change because we put in place the systems, the process, the resources to make them happen. And in that space, I think one key element that we have found in IDRC critical is the definition of the indicators of success. It's not only the systems and the values that different organizations have, it's how we measure success. And traditionally, when in particular in research, in knowledge sharing, in international development research, the call for proposals, the invitations for call for proposals used to have, or still have in many cases, indicators that are automatically are going to make very difficult for Southern-led institutions for Southern institutions to lead the partnership. And I think for that has been critical in redefining and even challenging our own understanding of success. And that doesn't mean that we change the quality of what we do. And I think that has been it's a critical conversation about donors. And I remember with many partnerships that we are leading, when you say, oh, we want to have Southern-led partners leading the initiative, the first reaction of many traditional donors is, well, we want the best proposals and we want the best or we want the best agencies leading the initiative. And I think something wrong on that question, because then how do we define what is the best? And we have been pushing that conversation to say that actually the best sometimes are the Southern-led. And they are the best if we challenge how we manage that. So we are putting a number of, if we have indicators around the number of previous initiatives, or the numbers of PhDs that you have, or the numbers of budgets that you budget, etc., etc., those are indicators automatically are going to define best in a different way that is not going to position Southern-led organizations or Southern organizations to lead the initiative. For us has been, I think from IDRC in particular, our interest of equitable partnerships is part of the DNA of IDRC from almost the beginning, over 50 years ago, on that idea that came constantly on supporting research and researchers was part of that mantra that IDRC had. I was until recently the director of the Climate Resilient Food Systems division, and Step Change is part of that division within IDRC. And 80+% of the principal investigators in the whole Climate Resilient Food System program are PIs sitting in southern organizations, and I think it really tells about the really how this is intentional in how IDRC wants to work. And I don't know if 80 is a lot or is not enough. I think it's a significant number, and that's why in Step Change, all the projects are Southern-led. It was because we knew that the kind of knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, and dialogue that we wanted to create needed to be by design led by Southern organizations. Otherwise, will be a very weird one. It will not bring the objectives. It will not be the best of that initiative. But that doesn't happen, as we have here a lot, just because we define that in the call for proposal. It needs to be created, supported, accompanied across the process, because it's not easy, because it's not going to be cheap, because not everybody knows how to do it. I think the Grant Plus model of IDRC, the idea that IDRC is a donor that they really sit down with the grantees and accompany the grantees across the process, not only on the technical aspect, but also in the grant administration, opening a dialogue, I think has been a secret sauce that give us a very good results, and understanding that different partners are going to have different priorities, and managing all these priorities. And I think that's critical because while we need to challenge the systems that we work in, until they are changed, we also need to navigate them. And also because in many cases, some of these systems are there for a reason that is important to the different partners or the different elements. And understanding and being open and be transparent about why certain systems are put in place in real partnerships in something that's going to make us better, all of us, because if we have a strong or what is sometimes looks very rigid financial systems, at the end maybe that actually makes our organization also more accountable, because we learn how to do it, and that organization is also going to be more competitive with more traditional donors, and is going to learn how to navigate the systems as we transform it. Otherwise, we will be able to create a bubble of a space where with one donor, in the case with IDRC or similar donors, we feel very comfortable. But when we go outside to the real world, or outside of our bubble, not everything works in the same place. So I think the understanding the different priorities as we transform the system actually increases the resilience of institutions as well, to bring their voices to other places, and then to challenge and to transform the systems from within. And I think that has been critical. In particular, I think what is probably in the case of Step Change, and we have here today several examples from different members of this initiative, is that developing these partnerships really is critical to enhance the knowledge sharing. And I say sharing because it really moves for transferring knowledge to creating knowledge and sharing knowledge together. And that, I think, as a final objective, needs to be at the core, because the final objective is not partnerships. I mean, we don't partner for the benefit of partnership. We partnership because our impact is going to be bigger, because we can influence more, because we are going to learn better. And I think that's the secret sauce of or the beauty of a step change, as putting at the knowledge area at the center, and then partnerships really make sense in those dialogues. I want to stop here. I hope that we have time for responding and following up with some of the questions. And thank you, Maria, for inviting me for today to come back a little bit to the Step Change family, at least even for a couple of hours. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Santiago, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on that equitable Southern partnerships and from your perspective. And definitely, yes, how we can learn together is important and help moving forward better and stronger in the future. Great. So again, I invite you all to put your question in the Q&A section. We have a few questions already, so we'll start with these. So I invite all the speakers and discussants to turn on their cameras at this point, so our attendees can see us all. So I see there's a question from Rosie, who asks, what would, and it's a question I'm gonna ask it whomever want to jump in for that one. So what would you say to a founder who said, well, it costs more money to do Southern leadership and less goes to communities, so why would I do that? So in terms of that justification. Any of the speaker have some justification there? Want to answer?
I can take that if nobody wants to challenge the donors. Well, I think actually this is a false dichotomy here. I mean, you're not taking money from anyone to give it to another one. You are bringing different objectives, and the money is being used for that piece. So so I think in that sense, when a donor comes with that question, I think we have to go back to challenge the question itself. On the other side, I think it's a critical element of as well of sustainability of what we are building. Because if a Southern institution is leading something, what we are really creating is the capacity of the Global South to lead the future without us. And that future actually, in the end, will benefit communities in a more, in the long run, in a more sustainable way. I could respond to that donor to say, well, if you are putting the money in the north, how anything is going to stay in the south when the project run out of funding. Then there will be nothing for communities. So I think that goes back to the indicators, the definition of success and definition of the best to manage. Who makes an organization the best organization to manage a grant? So I will challenge you with the question itself to the donor. I push back on that one. We do it, and I say it. We literally have, in a totally different field, we proposed that we wanted to have, in this case, was not Southern-led, but to have always at least one Southern institution. And the question for the other donor was, no, we want the best. And we say, well, actually, the best will be you have actually a partnership of Southern and Northern, or Northern Southern, or Southern and Southern. So I think we can challenge those questions to the donor and defining what is more costly, because I think personally more costly is to put money in an institution that once the project finishes, the communities don't receive any service. That's very costly. I think Shenaz has probably a stronger opinion. So
It's slightly stronger. I do think, Santiago, it is possibly I mean, thank you for the question, whoever put it out. But what we're looking for is very much a power shift, where it's not up to the donors to be saying what needs to be done. And what's currently happening, and I think, Johannes, you reminded me of this, donors put in their funding proposals, it must be led from the Global South, right? So what happens is your Global South organization sits with all the admin while your Northern organization is busy churning out papers. So we need to look at the unintended consequences as well. And also when we say, and Santiago, I just want to challenge you here. You say you want to look at the vision of success, but whose success? Is it for the donor or is it for the communities? Because I think the communities very strongly benefit from having strong Southern organizations that lead with a Southern mindset. And I want to come back to what I said in my presentation, is that if you're leading from the South, but you're leading in a Northern way, that's not Southern leadership. It's a way of leading, and it can even be done from the North. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Shanaz. Very good points. Anyone else want to comment on that question? No. Oh, Annette, please go ahead.
I think this also speaks about the tendency to think that partnerships, for example, between Global North and Global South is just one way of flow of funds. These partnerships are bigger than that. There is a lot that goes into that kind of collaboration. And like the speakers have highlighted, there is value in working together. Pooling our resources, pooling our expertise together to work together to deliver that common good that you want to deliver. So saying that, why not send the money to a community where work is taking place, or a similar model, then that is to negate the other benefits of that happen when organizations from different contexts work together, how they share capacity, knowledge, and lessons for more innovations around what works and what does not work to solve the global challenges.
Thank you, Annette. Excellent. I see a few. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add something quickly, if you allow me, Marie-Eve. That churning money to Southern organizations, Southern-led research, and as Shanaz has put it, it has to be via the Southern mindset, but also the question around the status quo and the path dependency, which I think, again, even within the Southern space, there are already power relations of organizations and actors who are strongly embedded in that space. And any money that comes or any funding that comes into the Southern research space actually goes to a particular set of institutions. So that is also an issue, that even within the Southern ecosystem, there's already a lot of inequalities in terms of who is getting the funding, how people relating in that sense. And again, that's a key issue that even as we talk about the Southern-led perspective, if not addressed in terms of really trying to open the space and being more inclusive in the funding model, then we end up really not achieving the desired equitable partnership. Just to mention one thing that perhaps could be relevant here is that our work as ARIN, we noted that, over time, as we were working with a number of fellows across Africa, we noted that there were a number of really excellent, fellows or researchers who maybe were just finishing their PhDs, but they were not affiliated to any institutions. They are not affiliated to the universities that get funding. They are not affiliated to think tanks that really get funding. So in that sense, a lot of times this cadre of early career researchers are often left out of the funding model. So already there is inequality in that particular aspect, that we leave a big chunk of researchers who actually could contribute to the researchers and impact of it. As Santiago says, we are not talking about partnership because we want people to work well, but we want to ensure that that working well is actually achieving impact. And so ensuring that we expand the space of funding for the different actors and stakeholders who can contribute to that equitable partnership, but also the subsequent impact, I think is very critical. And that's why through the ARI network, we've now launched this initiative called the mini grants, where we are getting small grants to the tune of 10,000 USDs to be able to support early career researchers who are not in the mainstream research ecosystems, to be able to really do some impactful, empirically grounded research and contribute to the knowledge and impact ecosystem in a more inclusive way. So that's also a point I really need to bring up as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Yes, very, very important points there. Thank you so much. I see a few other questions. One, at least about IDRC and how to set potentially having like some seed funding. So I'm just going to respond to that one, and then I'll ask one last question there with hopefully a short answer to it before we close, because we're getting close to the end now. So the question was, would funders consider models that have a bit of seed funding for the shortlisted projects, so more of a shared model? So at IDRC, at least, we have experimented with seed fundings. That's sometimes hard to do because of the timeframes in donor partnerships. Like when IDRC, for example, partner with another funder, it's bounded in time, and so adding time for seed funds can lose time in the final project, but it's the ideal somehow in many ways. Alternatively, what we do is often we have an inception phase within the project, allowing for all kind of changes and a space also for reinforcing the partnerships and clarifying and strengthening elements right from that point. And so I'm going to ask one last question, maybe with a quick intervention, if possible, from some of you. So the question is, what are your views on how we balance timely delivery of outcomes and the integration of equitable partnerships in climate projects? So timely delivery of outcomes and in the integration of equitable partnerships in climate projects. Annette, I see you've unmuted. You want to come in?
Go over the question again, please.
What are your views on how we balance timely delivery of outcomes and the integration of equitable partnerships in climate projects?
That's actually there is a big challenge there, because ensuring equity in partnerships will takes time. And then delivering adaptation action sometimes needs to be faster. So to save lives, to save the loss that people are going through. So balancing these two is something that can only happen at the platform of, one, what kind of relationships that have been built over time between organizations, but also that will exclude small organizations, because we will tend to move with those organizations we know are strong enough to deliver what we want to deliver. Then that means small organizations will be excluded from the funding, from the resources, and everything. So balancing that will take the understanding that if we want to have equity in partnerships, there are alternatives that will have to be foregone. You will not rush it and say you might achieve an outcome, but then at the pit efficiency against equity.
Thank you, Annette. Shanaz and then Susan.
Thank you. I think also we need to start shifting our, again, this vision of success, right? Why do these things, yes, there's a climate emergency we're responding to, so climate actions need to be swift. And my gut sense is establishing equitable Southern-based partnerships in the long term will result in that swifter action. So it's a sort of a curve that we're on. And again, it's about who says the delivery is slower. Is it the donor saying that? Or is it the community saying that? So who are we responding to and who are we accountable? Is it upwards or downwards? So I think yeah, just to reflect on that as well.
Thanks. And just to build on that, to say that the design should build in that curve that Shanaz is talking about, knowing that the beginning will be slower, but over time it will gradually become swifter. But that also suggests that short-termism should end, that we should have, like the locally led adaptation principles speak to, we should have longer-term partnerships that are beyond the 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, and think of a longer-term trajectory to really enable the capacity enhancement that, you know, will last. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all three for your comments. Yeah, to that question. We are getting to the end, so I'll invite Janice as the co-host for this this webinar as well to offer some closing remarks before we officially close. Thank you, Janice. Go ahead.
Wow, thank you, Mary-Eve. I think so much has been said. Quite interesting insights. And I think this is just the beginning of this conversation. I hope that we can sustain this sort of discussion so that we can actually learn and improve. Because as I said initially, a lot of times people have been talking about these issues around equitable partnerships, ethics, safeguarding, but the learning from what has happened and how things have unfolded, like we are getting here, has been very weak. So I think through this kind of conversation, we can be able to learn and continue to improve how we execute our research in ways that really meets the different objectives, but most importantly, being very conscious of really who are we doing the research for. As Shanaz has mentioned, put it, and I think Santiago as well, that equitable partnership is not just partnership for the sake of it. It's about really shaping a relationship that really enables impact and creates a very strong angle and beneficial perspective to our communities whom really we are supposed to serve with this particular knowledge. Otherwise, I think most of the issues have been summarized and raised. I would stop there. And again, on behalf of the ARIN network. We are really very grateful to be part of the conveners of this discussion. Again, I hope we can continue to have this conversation sustainable. Anna, thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And yes, thank you to all our speakers and discussants today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It is indeed the beginning for us of a conversation on this topic. Actually, the conversation will continue at the Step Change Learning Review, which will happen early next year and beyond. So stay tuned. We'll definitely engage again on that topic. So just a little note as we are closing. Next week, on Wednesday, September 18th, we will hold our last Step Change webinar of this series. So it will be on inclusive climate action, discussing lessons from tackling structural barriers to gender equality and social inclusion. So you can find information about it on LinkedIn, and I will share the link to register via in the chat. If I'm able to, hopefully. But so thank you. And if you're interested for the recording of previous webinars, you can email us at stepchange@idrc.ca. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll be in touch shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.